delegation, as the Social Development Council has been hired as a consultant on this project. We'll also declare conflict for the Communication Report 2023-26, as the employment services transformation directly impacts the funding for the Social Development Council. Just FYI for everybody, if I go running out of the room at some point, it's because my nephew is coming. My sister-in-law is in labor, and I love being here, but I want to be there a little bit more than being here right now. So,
thank you, Councillor Hubert. Any further disclosures of interest? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to go in committee of the whole, please? Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor McIntosh. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. A motion to adopt the minutes of the meeting from February 27th. Councillor Gardner, seconder. Councillor McDonald. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
We have one presentation this evening, Mr. Mayor, and that is the Eastern Ontario Agri-Food Network Annual Report. And here to present is the Executive Director, Louis Bélan.
Good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I dive right in, I suppose? Yeah. Thank you. The Eastern Ontario Agri-Food Network, quick overview for those who don't know. We are a non-profit organization with just under 200 members, and we support practically any initiative in the agri-food sector in Eastern Ontario. Just to put a ballpark on that, in 2021, the agri-food sector across Canada represented around $134 billion and is 1 in 9 employees in Canada across the entire sector. So just to put that a little bit into perspective. Next slide, please. The three pillars that the EOAN focuses on is marketing of local producers, capacity building, again, of those local producers, and advocacy for them. Next slide, please. My reason for being here tonight, we are on the 3rd year of a funding agreement with the City of Cornwall. $25,000 were provided in 2021 and 2022. We are seeking the same again. And our collaboration with city staff has been absolutely phenomenal. We love working with Kat Rendek, and what we have been missing is an appointed council member to sit on our board. The last council member to do that was Éric Bergeron, and since his resignation, we're looking to fill that seat so that we have proper representation at our board for the Cornwall interests. Just threw a few names up there of some of the members we have here in Cornwall. So Zip Grow is a very active member. We are very proud to count them in our numbers. Spicy Pearl, Pitt Street Garden, a few of them there. And I'm kind of a stats guy, so I like to throw in another perspective. So in terms of the population in Cornwall, our ask is about 53 cents per resident over the course of the year. We do get funding from SDG counties and Prescott-Russell counties as well, and over the 3 municipalities, what you see on the screen there: accountability, governance, financial leverage, sector engagement, impact, sector representation, and sustainability were the big asks from council members in terms of what we offer. So I'm just going to go very quickly through all those. Next slide, please. We reviewed all our bylaws in the past couple years. As mentioned, there's 4 municipal board seats to provide guidance and oversight: Prescott-Russell, SDG, Cornwall, and Akwesasne. Training was provided to new directors, and obviously having a council member on the board, there's direct oversight in terms of our funding, of our budgets, and our projects. These numbers are a little bit out of date. This is when this is a few years ago when the agreements were signed. We were looking at about 28% of our core funding from the City of Cornwall. These funds are very much used to leverage other funding. So OMAFRA was a grant we received to cover over the past 2 years. We received a total of 94,000 and change. And we are currently just finishing up a Ministry of Francophone Affairs grant for 50,000 and a Desjardins grant for 25. So those core funding, the core funding we get from the municipalities really helps us to get additional funding. Overall, 190 members. This is as of December, so it's a little bit out of date. We do get a few sponsors as well, and a few of our programs we do charge a nominal fee for, so we get funding from there. And in terms of marketing, we have a significant Facebook audience. Instagram is just starting up, and our newsletter is impressively read. Honestly, I'm used to much lower readership rates on newsletters, but our members and the overall population do read our newsletters. Next slide, please. A few of the projects we had in the past couple of years, the local food map was available online and 78 vendors and markets signed up. We published a local food discovery booklet with 20 vendors, 5,000 copies distributed overall. Sample the East is a program of itineraries across Eastern Ontario. There's 10 of them now, and we're building more. And the local food portal, we're closing down because we were a little late in launching it with the pandemic. A lot of our members scrambled to get an online store going and went with our own solutions just in terms of the urgency of it. So we were just a few months behind, so not the impact we were looking for, but you know, lessons learned, I suppose. Next slide, please. We are quite busy in terms of representation. I sit on the International Culinary Trail Committee, which is a partnership between Eastern Ontario, Western Quebec, Vermont, and New York to establish the first international culinary trail in the world. OEMC, you're all familiar with. We presented our work with a new local food brand there. I also presented the brand at the International Agritourism Conference in Vermont. I did that virtually, of course. And we are laying the groundwork for quite a few advisory committees based on different sectors in the agri-food industry to support our members. I do want to mention the next steps in terms of the Culinary Trail and the Agri-Tourism Conference. I just heard today that in 2 weeks' time, there is a global agri-tourism network launching, and so we're in the discussions to be part of that as well. About 20 countries are participating so far. We had a strategic plan built, refined over the past couple years. It has 100% guided my work since I joined the network in July of last year. Much more significant focus on stakeholders and what their needs are, and of course our members and funders. Stable staffing, admin, financial systems. Strategic plan is going great, is all I can say about that. Next slide, please. I'll speak a little bit into what that means for the future. So as of next week at our AGM, we are using a new membership structure. Our previous membership structure was based on the type of business. So farms paid a certain fee, farmers markets paid a certain fee, food businesses and restaurants paid a separate fee. We're switching over to a business maturity membership structure. Allows us to increase our prices, honestly, get a little bit more revenue directly from the members, and also it allows us to align ourselves with the grants and supports that are available across the industries. For example, BDC, where you get most grants are after 2 years. We have the same structure. So startup members will not be paying anything. They'll have a free membership for the first 2 years of operation. And once they have 2 years maturity in their business, they'll start paying into our membership structure. A few projects in the work to tackle a few challenges in the area, distribution being one of them for our members. So we're looking at options in terms of funding to support that. We have launched in January over at ZipGrow, actually. We launched our new local food brand. So our network is struggled with identity a little bit, where the network was focused on members, and we had more and more projects and initiatives focused on the public. So we created a new local food brand to represent all the public initiatives. So our itineraries fall under that, and we are investing quite a few marketing dollars in that new local food brand, with our websites launching this Thursday. I think that covers all of that. With this local food brand, Savor East Ontario is the name of it. It really is to connect the consumers with our local producers. That is the single objective with that brand, and it's built around that. It will be able to grow in scale and size. If I go back to our strategic plan as well, we are improving our organizational efficiency. We implemented a new CRM, so customer relationship manager, to manage our members, be able to scale better as well, and be able to adapt to KPIs, or key performance indicators, from different stakeholders, i.e. from council members as well. If there's certain things that council members or municipalities are looking for, we can adjust the systems to track individual KPIs. That about covers it. The next slide is what the new local food brand looks like. It's an open invitation to our AGM on Thursday in Alexandria, where we will be launching both our new website for the members and a new local food brand focused website. That about covers it. I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Before we get to questions, I'll ask council for a motion to receive the presentation. Councillor Good, Councillor Bennett, questions and comments from council. Councillor McIntosh and Councillor Good.
Yeah, when you mentioned that per capita cost in Cornwall are 53 cents, the grants aren't based on per capita, is it?
No, they are not. The grants are really, we go get grants outside of municipalities. The grants we get are per project. I just like to throw in the per capita for municipalities to see the impact.
Yeah, I just noticed that the county's 19,000 more residents, and they pay the same as we do. So
Yes, it is it has been a subject of discussions with the other municipalities as well. My answer to that was that this was put in place 2 years ago now, and numbers were a little bit different back then, both in our membership and in population. So I will be looking to the municipal board members to do a subcommittee and look at the funding structure coming from municipalities for our next ask for next year, because I think it should be a little bit more proportional and equitable across the regions.
agree with you.
Councillor Good.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. It's so lovely, and I really like the new logo. Local food is so important, and I'm so pleased to see it highlighted. We have a very rich agri-food industry within our area, and as we're seeing the grocery stores, the prices at grocery stores going out of control, it's not to say you're going to get a better price here, but the money's going right back into your community. And so this is something that I ultimately am very much in support of. I think the ask of $25,000 is a very reasonable ask, and I think that it's something that will pay us back because of the fact that it generates tourism. I'd like to say that I'd be very interested to be your council representative if you would have me, if that would be appropriate. And I look forward to hearing more about the events that are going on and seeing how things unfold as the season comes about. Thank you.
Noted, Councillor Good. To council, if anyone indicates an interest in joining this committee, please let me know. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I had a question about your members, and obviously this list isn't exhaustive, but you did say you had 200 members. And I've noticed even in your independent grocer now, there's local produce on offer. Are they one of your members, or is that just their own initiative that they're?
Yes, it's a movement. I have to say, it's definitely a movement. We had a previous project for local food counters in Prescott Russell, and we have 3 local food counters out there. One is in a Metro grocery store. This project is evolving under the new food brand, and we're including a lot of our members that are doing this out of their own initiative. And there's starting to be quite a long list of them. So we're branding them. We're going to be calling them Savor East Mini Markets, and anyone is invited to have a counter like this, because it is all for the greater good. I mean, anyone who can sell local products will help the agri-food sector and help the local economy. It's no doubt.
I think one of the advantages of COVID, it's ironic to think of COVID as having brought us advantages, but one has been stimulating home gardening on everybody's part, and also greater attention to local shopping. So it's, as you say, it's a movement. I'd say it's kind of exploding.
Yes, and if I can add, we had quite a few new members of, local residents with a an acre plot of land, and they decide to start a garden and sell baskets, and they have 10, 12 CSA members, and they start up like that, and it's been great. It's absolutely wonderful to see.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kind of looking through the presentation. 2 questions. Number 1, if I became a member, about what, $80 for a membership, give or take?
We have
quick math here.
We have quite a few different membership categories. So as a business, our new membership structure will be $125 for the standard member, and $225 for a category we're calling the contributing member. And those are businesses and producers that want to that are a little bit more devoted to the sector as a whole and want to contribute. And we will also have a individual membership tier at $35 a year.
And what do I get for my membership?
A whole lot of promotion. We have monthly networking events. On our new website, we will be offering business support, and that is through other members, I have to mention. So it's bringing everyone across the community together, whether it's other nonprofit organizations that offer certain trainings in certain sectors. We'll throw it up there and give our members access. A lot of publicity through website and newsletters. Like I mentioned, our newsletter hits about 1,400 people now, and every newsletter we have a member profile where we highlight one of our members, and our new website is built around those member profiles. So they will, consumers will have very, very easy access, efficient and quick access to our member profiles, so they can find them more easily.
Okay, and you mentioned another ask. Is it logical to make the assumption that the municipalities that are involved are going to be funding this for a long time?
I would like to defer that to the committee that I will set up once we have representation across all municipalities. I personally believe that municipalities do have a role in funding, not 100%. But a lot of what we accomplish supports economic development and tourism, more and more tourism. So I'd like there to be a part there, but I will certainly follow the lead of the committee I will put together.
Okay. then perhaps a suggestion, and you can take it for whatever it's worth, that rather than continue to come to the municipalities and say every 3 years, hey, can you give us some more money, perhaps some kind of a memorandum of understanding or some sort of partnership where the funding is established over a medium to long term, and then our prospective councils can say, okay, do we want to get into this over the long term or not, rather than probably better for you and quite frankly better for us if we know what our potential long-term commitment would be. Just something to think about when you're sitting with your committee. You can take that or leave it however you wish. Thanks for your
100%.
time. Thank you,
Thank you.
Worship.
Further questions or comments from council? Councillor Gunjo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Councillor. Let's talk about long-term business. Do you think these kind of activities can grow up? Do you have any success story that you can share that are existing through your group?
Yes, absolutely. Without taking too much time, the agritourism is a growing sector, and having traveled a lot throughout the world, I lived for 3 years in New Zealand, and you know, you keep pinching yourself, thinking that I'm actually living this. And then I came back to Eastern Ontario, and you know, I grew up here thinking that we had straight roads and cornfields. And once you start digging deeper, Eastern Ontario has absolutely phenomenal producers, phenomenal businesses. We have, believe it or not, a producer that grows truffles. This is the only producer in Canada, I believe. Truffles are certainly a European product, but they are grown right here in Eastern Ontario. We have a record-setting garlic in Eastern Ontario. We have amazing mushrooms. We have all these producers that are that can compete on the world stage. And to grow tourism, I strongly believe that the local communities need to believe in it. They need to be part of it. Tourism is often approached from a outside-in perspective, where we try to attract visitors. But I believe that if we build an identity and people believe in themselves here, that will grow out. Niagara is a great example. Prince Edward County is a great example. They started growing their identity and started believing in it, and everybody just jumps on board. So if I take Prince Edward County as an example, a direct example, I think that Eastern Ontario has all the ingredients to do the exact same thing and grow into a very attractive region for everyone. I'm not sure that answers your question directly, but
Yes, it's a good answer that you gave. I was wondering, please, can you explain us what was the impact of COVID in your activities?
I wasn't employed by the network when COVID hit, so I can only speak from what our members speak about, and it was really it highlighted certain strengths and certain weaknesses in the sector. Distribution became a huge piece. Distribution is one of those sectors that people don't realize how much labor is in and how many costs, and it's a very difficult sector to tackle, especially for small producers. So I think there was, after the initial negative impact where everybody stays home, there's that kind of growth and innovation and ingenuity that, I'll be honest, I think only we have in Eastern Ontario that started creeping up. So a lot of new techniques, more efficient workflows on all scales on the producer level.
And is it possible to think about door-to-door distribution? Is it something that we can imagine in our community?
Yes, we already have a few members starting that, and that is the project that I'd like to put in place. I'd like to have, and this will require obviously additional funding from another source. But what I'd like, my ideal scenario would be to have a refrigerated truck with a few circuits across the area on a weekly basis that stops at producers to pick some produce up and stops at destinations where it can be sold, and have that kind of cycle of distribution that we can manage.
With an option to order by online, for example?
Yeah, so there's like I said, there's quite a few of our members that are already doing that, and doing distribution themselves at a very high cost. Our mini markets will play a role in that as well, because those can be distribution centers. But quite a few members started selling online. We have one member that launched a platform called Agricology, which the idea is to gather as many producers as possible on one platform. Local Line was supposed to do that. It did not quite work out in terms of workflow and ease of use, but Agricology is one of the members that we have that's on the right path in terms of online sales, for sure.
Thank you very much for your answers. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Motion to receive the presentation. Calling the vote on the motion to receive the presentation. All in favor? All opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Youth Space. And here to present from the Cornwall Police Service are Constable Casey McGregor and Carmen Cousineau. And also joining them is Terry Muir, President of the Optimist Club.
Good evening. Welcome back to council.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your agenda to listen to my proposal today. I'm here with Terry Muir, President of the Optimist Club, Carmen Cousineau, and my Youth Advisory Committee. Can you guys just show of hands, my Youth Advisory Committee? My name's Constable Casey McGregor, and I'm a youth officer with the Cornwall Police. I was born and raised in Cornwall and remembered a time when I used local city parks for playing basketball, tennis, pools, outdoor hockey rinks, and playing street hockey and coming home when the street lights turned on. Since my time as a kid, a lot of these activities have been removed from local parks, and some other parks are in need of repair. I'm here today to ask you for the municipal land located on the corner of Marlborough Street and 4th Street, City of Cornwall, commonly known as the Bob Turner Arena, to build a safe space for youth over the age of 13 to give them activities and a place to grow. So I have some statistics I'd like to share with you, which brought us here today. We'll have to go back, please. Here we go. Thank you. So Cornwall Police has seen a 55% increase in youth-related occurrences from 2020 to 2022. There are 4,472 unique youth occurrences over the past 3 years. There's a 48% of youth involved with Cornwall Police that have had multiple occurrences. 48%, there are 4,472 unique occurrences over the last 3 years. 48% of the youth involved with Cornwall Police have had multiple occurrences. 15 individuals account for 10% of the involvement, and 48% of the occurrences happen outside the home, with 60% of youth occurrences occurring between 12 p.m. and 10 p.m., mostly frequently during the week and in the summer months. Next slide, please. Now, all these occurrences are not all negative interactions with police, but our top 4 occurrences are trouble with youth, assaults, disturbing the peace, and mischief. As you can see, trouble with youth calls are defined as youths lingering, youths being noisy and acting out, youths causing issues at school, unruly behavior, drug usage, parents calling problems with their kids. As you can see, that is the number 1 generated occurrence type for youths. Next slide, please. In this next slide, the graph reflects the increase of total youth occurrences over the last 3 years. The total youth arrested and charged, you can see in the lighter blue bar, as remaining the same. The lowest bar is arrested and not charged. Many of our youth enjoy Cornwall's beautiful waterfront. They tend to migrate down to the Banshell area and the Cornwall the Cornwall Harbor. Due to ongoing problems with youth, in 2022, no trespassing signs were installed at the Cornwall Banshell. This shifted many of our youth to the Cornwall Harbor. We then displaced them from the Cornwall Harbor, which caused them to go to areas like the old Domtar property and other hidden areas of Cornwall. These properties are not accessible by vehicle and are difficult to get into by foot. There's little to no supervision in these areas. I use these areas to check in with my youth, build rapport, and support. I need to know where they are in order to engage them and also to update their families on their well-being. Next slide. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So Ribfest draws huge crowds down to Lamoureux Park, which is no secret, but many of the people that attend are youth. In 2022, there were several incidents involving youth that came to our attention as organizers. The main issue happened on Saturday, involved a growing number of young people that were roaming around the park, getting into physical altercations with people their age. When this group kept growing to over 20 people, it became evident that we needed the support of Cornwall Police to address the issue before someone was seriously injured. Police attended, many of the youth were detained, some were arrested, while others were dispersed from the area. When speaking with many of the youth involved, the recurring issue was that there is no place for them to hang out, and not everyone can afford to attend events. After reflecting on those comments, I've come to realize there is really a lack of welcoming spaces for teenagers. And in October of 2022, I spoke with Constable Casey McGregor and Sergeant Scott Coulter at an event, and we discussed the lack of welcoming spaces for youth and the issues that relate to it. We agreed that we need to work towards something for our youth.
So why do youths behave this way? Is it parenting? Is it mental health? Or is it the lack of welcoming spaces? In speaking with many of my youth, the common theme is there's nothing to do in Cornwall. If you're a family with disposable income, you could play hockey, there's arts and music. But for the most part, many of the families out there don't have disposable income, and the use of public parks are of the way that they can do some activities. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Some are in need of a repair. Should I start over, Mr. Mayor?
No, that's fine. Please continue.
So yes, we have lots of basketball courts and some swimming pools, but some are in need of repair, and pools are too busy to get into. Next slide, please. COVID-19 impacted mostly on our young people. It significantly affected their mental health with social isolation. I've received written letters by mental health counselors from the Cornwall Hospital, caseworkers at Children's Aid Society, school teachers, and Lauren Crest Youth Services. Every one of those letters explain what social isolation has done to our young people. I have seen sharp increase in suicidal ideations, increase in drug use, and a decline in overall mental health. An idea was formed at the Touch a Truck event last year at the Civic Complex with Mr. Muir, Sergeant Coulter, and myself, with an idea to provide a safe space for young people to go and to give them something to do and a sense of belonging. Next slide, please. Our proposed project is like we temporarily call the Cornwall Youth Space. We had a general idea of what we wanted in the space, but needed to talk to youth who would be using it. We had 2 youth working groups consisting of 15 of Cornwall's youth who generated ideas of what they wanted in their space. So far, they wanted basketball courts, ball hockey, gazebos, power, Wi-Fi, a skate park, graffiti wall, fruit trees, chessboards, and a neutral meeting space. A neutral meeting space is for community support agencies such as counselors and youth officers and families to meet with their kids. In determining the location in Cornwall, there were 3 key principles that were required to make this space safe and successful. Accessibility, supervision, and activities. And we choose our primary location as the old Bob Turner Arena site. It is perfectly situated and accessible for everyone. It has enough space to expand activities. There's infrastructure underground from the previous building. The Bob Turner is centralized and is close to several schools, the community hospital, and very accessible by bike and by foot. Marlborough Street and 4th Street are busy roads and are frequently traveled by Cornwall Police. These areas provide clear sight lines from both roads. The Cornwall Armories is located across the street, and the Wildcats Football Club is on site. We have received support from the Cornwall Wildcats, an abundance of interest and support from communities, the community, especially high schools, who would like to help and build the structures and tables. It is our belief that if our young people play a role in building this structure, it will be less likely vandalized and damaged. Next slide. These are some of our supporting agencies that are supporting our initiative. Excuse me.
Next slide. So, at the exact same time that this group came together to talk about what youth can do in our community, Public Safety Canada released guidelines for a grant called the Building Safer Communities Grant. So I was contacted last summer, so the 2 of them happening at the same time by then CAO Maureen Adams to see if we could do something in Cornwall. We were one of the few municipalities in Ontario that were targeted for this particular grant. The grant is in 2 phases. The first one was a development phase that occurred between December and today, this week. The second is to submit a 3-year grant proposal to come up with strategies to help deter or prevent guns and gangs and how we can make Cornwall a safer community. I am working with Cornwall Police and working with community members and the Social Development Council put together a proposal which was submitted on February 28th. There's a 90-day window that takes for approval. I contacted them today. I'm optimistic that we are going to be successful. It has gone through the review committee, so all of the staff level have had a review of this grant application, so now it goes on for signatures. So it is a process, but I'm quite confident we will get the maximum dollars that we applied for, $899,533. I'm optimistic, okay? I can't say it's ours. But this is one of the initiatives that we would like to support with that grant, probably in the $600,000 to $650,000 range for the park to put in that basketball court, the graffiti wall, and some of the items that the youth have identified. The other part of the grant is called micro grant application. We don't have all the answers right now that we need, so what we want to do through the Development Council, Social Development Council, is have a grant application process where community agencies and groups can apply for some of the other funds that are left over that to run programs either in the park or on other locations to help address how our youth can better be served in Cornwall. And so this is how did we get about this application is the next slide. Through Social Development Council and our partners here, we held 7 focus group consultation with stakeholders, many of the organizations in the community. The focus group, the youth, I'm going to say youths for those of you that will know what that means. We've met with them and they helped. They actually designed and drew out what this park might look like. We had consultations with individuals with life experience, with a diverse community. And we had a community survey. The survey went out to stakeholders, organizations, but it was also posted on social media. And so I think about 150 organizations received the survey. All of that feedback came back together. Not one negative comment about supporting youth by building this space in this community and the micro-grant program as a way to even increase the type of activities that might take place in the space. So, and that all led to today. The last step of the process for us, for the development phase, is presentation here tonight to you as City Council. So what we're asking for is to use municipal lands and hopefully come to the table with about just shy of $900,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cousineau, Mr. Muir, Councilman McGregor. Oh,
Sorry, just the last slide. So part of our working group, our kids came up with a mission statement. Together with our community, building a safe, healthy space for all youth to chill, to get away, to connect, and to thrive.
that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Before I go to council for questions, can I get a motion to receive the presentation? Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Gardner, questions. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple of questions and perhaps a comment. Do you have a timeline? Like, we're going to go have a report from our administration. It's typically how we do these types of things. Is there a timeline you need to us to kind of make some kind of formal decision?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we've worked with Public Safety Canada from April to June, even though our grant kind of finishes this week on Friday, and the next one we expect to start on July 1st. We've put in safeguards and some funding to do some planning, to work with administration, to continue to work with our youth council and possible council rep to work out the plan so that once July 1st arrives and the funding is approved, we can get things moving quite quickly.
So safe to say you'd like us to make a decision by July 1st?
That would be ideal.
Well, I just want to make sure we're crystal clear on that.
Yes.
So, okay,
That would
fair
be
enough.
the ideal.
The second thing that I wanted to ask, you made reference to supervision, and I didn't really see it in the presentation. How do you visualize supervision? Just, I know you made reference to the police service, typically because it's a main street. Is that kind of the supervision you had in mind, or is there somebody who officially is going to kind of be around, or like, how do you see that working?
Well, public and police. So the sight lines with Marble and 4th Street are great. They're commonly traveled by police officers. But there's also, I believe it's Clark, that's located right beside the Bob Turner Arena. It's just a little dead-end road. There's also, so we can go in there and just check in. What I'd like to see is a driveway that went in through up and down of the Bob Turner Arena, so we could pull in and then be able to do some supervision from there, as well as parents being able to drive in and drop their kids off.
Okay, just enough. So I spent probably about 900% of my time at the Bob Turner Center as a kid, when there was a building there, and even if I wasn't playing hockey, we found an old coffee cup and some broken sticks and figured out how to do something with that. And if it wasn't that, kicking field goals at halftime when nobody else was around. So I can certainly appreciate, I probably know that property almost as well as perhaps those of you who've supervised it. There is, in fact, a laneway back there that you could, now there's a telephone pole, so you might have to work your way around that. The traffic circle as well, or the little circle in the back. As well as a teacher at CCVS, I work with young people, so any opportunity we have as a municipality to enhance the well-being of our young people, I'm all for. I'm eager to see the report from admin. One last final question. I think I know the answer to this, but just out of curiosity, is this kind of the only site that you really see working with this type of project? Or if through administration we said, hey, we haven't, and I don't think there is one, but if by some happenstance there was another site in a close proximity that would work, is it possible, or is this really the only site? So for example, Gladstone Public School, nothing's happening there. Now I know there's a building there, and that's just what popped into my head, but is there any other site in the core that you think could work, or is this kind of the only game in town?
This is the only one.
Okay, good to know. Thank you for your time. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like Councillor Hollingsworth, I didn't play a whole lot of hockey, but I umpired baseball, I coached baseball, junior hockey at that area. It was very, very popular. But this is not really about me. This is about the presentation that you folks have brought here. And I've worked with two of you. Constable, I unfortunately not. But the most important thing here that I heard today was the young people getting involved and telling us what they need. And thank you for taking the time, your time, you young folks, because you're our future leaders and you started leading already. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Just want to kind of echo what Councillor Gardner said. You know, for years, this is only my second term of council, but I was kind of hanging around this lot for quite a while before that, and it was always, you know, what do we do with our youth? How do we get them involved? Where are they? Why aren't they standing up for themselves? Why don't they have ideas? Well, holy crap, I mean, you ticked them all off with this one. So, like, you've given us your ideas, you're involved, you're advocating for yourselves, which to me is the bigger thing of all this is that you as the youth have identified what you need, and you've gotten involved to the point where you've got like this great plan. And I'll agree with Councillor Hollingsworth. When I was younger, we did everything at the Bob Turner. It was center for everybody. Everybody could get there, which I think is the key, and it was probably why you're like this area, is because it is as central as you're going to get. And I mean, I was from the East End. We played with kids from Riverdale and from Amherst Corners and down along the waterfront. Everybody just came there. And so it was like tennis and baseball and hockey and football, you name it, it was there. Now, as you said earlier, those sports are great and I love them, but there's an expense to those sports, a big expense to those sports. And it's really limiting who can take part in them. But when I look at your list of activities you want here, these are activities anybody can play. You show up with a ball and 12 kids can have 2 hours of great time, basketball or whatever. The ball hockey is again, something else. I think Dean also mentioned a couple sticks and an empty can, and you had a hockey game going, right? So the gazebo is a great idea. I like the idea of the power with the Wi-Fi. Let's face it, this is the generation we're in, and I hear I say with 2 phones sitting here looking for a Wi-Fi. So I get it, right? And so the skate park, I think, is something we've been discussing for a long time. The one we have is clearly outdated and needs to be replaced. And so if something great down there could happen with that, the graffiti wall is a great idea too. That's something that's becoming a new and a bigger art form. So everything I see here is great. And what really impresses me is that the youth stepped up, but the youth showed up. Man, it's one thing to say the kids want it, but the kids showed up. So you've got my attention. I'm really looking forward to this report, and you certainly have my support for it.
Thank you. Councillor Dupel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I greatly appreciate it. And when you see the great work that's gone into all of the planning of this, and especially the engagement of the youth. I can remember being elected 12 years ago to City Council, and Madam Clerk and I were the Youth Advisory Committee, and we had a committee, and we were trying to do, youth were saying that they wanted to do things, so we were doing like some swims at the Benson Center and some skates and trying to do that, but clearly youth want somewhere to go. And that's 12 years ago, so we've come a long way in 12 years with, you know, our youth, and we have to modernize ourselves to as a city council to match what our youth want, because our youth are definitely tomorrow's future. And I think that this is a fabulous idea. I see great things coming out of it once it starts going. I can see some big fundraising dollars being raised with selling benches in the park and with advertised names on it. I mean, I can just see, you know, it's gonna just take off. And you know, our residents will put their support behind our youth. So I am so pleased that this has made it to the table, and thank you for all your hard work. Thank you to the Youth Committee for stepping up and bringing back the information that we need, and congratulations and job well done.
Thank you.
Councillor McIntosh.
I'm going to really date myself. It was the athletic grounds when I hung out there. I grew up a few blocks back. Dean was a little guy living around the corner from me. he used to hang with my kids. Anyway, the athletic grounds, later the Bob, was a big part of my life. I came from a single-parent family with limited funds, and going to the Bob and playing outdoors and all the freebies that went with it was a big part of my life, along with a lot of my friends. I was trying to think of one word that would describe this, and I came up with the word ambitious. It really is ambitious. It's a great project. Casey, good to see you again, Casey. It's you talked about unique youth occurrences. And, what is that?
Those are that's youth occurrences that are just kind of from I guess A to Z, right? So it could be mischiefs, disturb the peace, trouble with youth, mental health call, attempt suicides, mischiefs. So not all of them are the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talked about one of the things too, troubles at home, and we understand how serious that is. A couple 8 days ago in Edmonton, a family with a problem with a 16-year-old ended with two Edmonton's finest being killed, and another death too, the 16-year-old. So times have changed since when I grew up, and I think it's interesting too that the OCOT was formed in 1930s to deal with the same problems you're talking about. It was during the Depression, long before my time, but our citizens of tomorrow. And there used to be a gate going into the athletic grounds that had the OCOT thing, so it was the hub for the OCOT. So you're going back to the future, really, when you're doing this. The Optimist Club, Terry, has long been involved with youth. I can remember dating myself again when you had the project Optimist Park, and it didn't follow through. It didn't come through for various reasons, but you talked about a youth arena being built there, soccer fields are there, and the ballparks. But this is a grander thing, and the timing is perfect, I think. And Casey, you deal with these cases. You have a front row seat to all this youth problems. When you talk about social isolation, part of that too is the new world with internet, cell phones, and all this too. A lot of times youth are really isolated themselves. I live near a bus stop where the high school kids get off, and when they're going to school, they're talking on the phone. And when they're going back off the bus, they're talking on the phone. And they're talking to the same friends they probably saw all day. And then when they get home, I went through it too with my kids, they're spending all their time on the computer. So we need more of this. Congratulations to you. A big thumbs up to the Optimist City Police and others for coming through with this, and I really hope it comes through big time.
Thank you.
Councillor Good and Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for this presentation. I echo many of the comments that have been made around the table tonight, and I think the timing is sensational. It's so wonderful when we see this access to funding dollars come in at a time when we need it, when the conversations are being had, when the planning is just, I see this as being perfect timing, and I'm so grateful for that. Our youth really need our support. They need our investment. If you wouldn't mind, Madam Clerk, could you scroll up one slide? I just want to point this out. It's hard to see in this picture here, but I'm looking around the room and I see most of the people that are in this picture in this room. So that says a lot. It really, really does. That they've shown up and they continue to show up. It means you're offering something that's really special. My youth doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but time passes quickly, though. You know, it's just weird how that happens. And Madam Clerk, if you could scroll up another 3 slides to the community partners here. I just want us to all take a look at this list. These are some of the most important organizations in our community, and to see them backing this project, this brings weight, this brings validity. This tells me this is not just a pipe dream, but this is a real project that is going to happen. I am so excited to see a space where youth can just exist. No expectations, forget this loitering, you need to buy something, go somewhere else. And as you were talking about them just being driven further and further away into places where crime happens. And this is what happens when we keep pushing youth out of our public spaces. So I hope that this can come around in a short order, and to see this build over the years. I don't live very far from this location. I'm really looking forward to it as my now 8-year-old stepdaughter starts to near those teenage years, and we'll be looking for things for her to do. I know I have seen the impacts of COVID and deteriorating mental health in my own family, and I really believe that if something like this would have been around, it could definitely save lives. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you so much. You have my full support.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I won't repeat everything that's been said. I agree with all of it. But I do have a question, and that is, with all the activities you have planned, and you made a reference to the opportunity for youth to meet with workers, for example, do you foresee that there might be a playground supervisor or a role there where there might be somebody basically in charge, like a referee or the organizer who makes sure that, the ball hockey can happen at the same time as the basketball over here, or that sort of thing? Like, there's got to be some, maybe a playground supervisor?
Well, one of the things that we've discovered while talking to the youth is that, they want to be hands-on. They want to be involved in this thing. They actually want to drive a nail into it and be part of it. So, our short-term goal is that because it's their own park, because they're literally going to help put it together, the lack of supervision we don't think is going to be as prevalent as it would be if you went out and built something, city-owned property or whatever. So, these kids are going to take care of their own property, and, maybe down the road, as it grows into what the youth decide it's going to be, then there might be an opportunity to have somebody there to do different activities and that. But our goal from the onset of this is to have at least as many youth involved in our board making decisions as there are adults, because as adults we have a history of thinking we know what they want, going ahead and building it, and then finding out later that it didn't work. So this way we get it right from them, and our belief is that they're going to help take care of it.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments from council? Councillor Ngunjo, then Councillor Sabri.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Thank you very much for showing up with this amazing project. And I remember we met at Optimist Park during a soccer tournament. It's very important what you're doing.
Thank you.
Your project is something that we need in our community. And I think that as a community, it is our responsibility to build or to bring this kind of project around the table, because we need to give to youth space to be youth. So it's very important. And I'm sharing all that have been said by my colleague here. But I have a question that I would like to ask to you. I've seen these activities, and I was wondering if it will be a covered facility, because during the winter it's going to be tricky to have all those activities there. I know it's very easy for hockey, for example, but when we have 1 meter of snow, it's not going to be useful. So I think, did you think about something covered, or is it open?
So we have gazebos in the plan of the structures. We're still in the designing phase as far as what type of gazebos we want, whether they're going to be, one side of them is going to be blocked to prevent some elements from coming in. So if it is raining out, they can still be covered underneath the gazebos. Other ideas were possibly building something that looks like the band shell, where it's, concave and covered at the top, and keeping them away from the elements. But as far as a heated space and completely covered, we would absolutely love to see that in the future. But we want to get in the ground first with this project, and then I think the infrastructure around the Optimus Park, or not the Optimus, I'm sorry, excuse me, the Bob Turner will provide us the space to do some covered and maybe a permanent structure.
Thank you very much for your answer, and I support you 100%.
Thank you.
Councillor Sabre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Like everyone else, everything has been said about it, and I'm quite, commend you for the application and all the work that have gone from the young to the upper levels that have put this all together. My question, though, is this is the 3.5-year investment initiative and that stuff. So maybe, Carmen, could you roll out as to how the funding will come into play? It's not going to be a lump sum, is it? No. So, and then what are the priorities in addressing those phases then, if that's how you're going to put it together?
So initially it was 3.5 because the 0.5 was supposed to be a 6-month planning development, but by the time the approvals came in and all the documentation came in, it shrank down to 4 months. So we started our planning in December, and we finished and submitted by the end of February. So we actually did it in 3 months. So the proposed 24 years is $349,900, and the second full year is the same. The third year is just under 200,000. So it's 350, 200 over the 3 years. And there's built in some flexibility because a lot has to do with chain management, getting the materials and supplies. If we're going with 2 gazebos, are we going with a band shell? How much it would cost to put in electricity. We've been fortunate. Other people have called us and said, how could we get involved? We're really interested. And I have to mention the Wildcats in particular, because we're talking about the space. They called and said, we like it, we're in. How could we do this? Because the parents are there with other kids, not necessarily playing football, who would like to maybe shoot some hoops or check their internet and things like that. So I think right now, the 350, 200 is what we will have approved on or before July 1st. And then there's going to be some fundraising that will happen after. And as the school boards have already said, they want their students to help build the gazebos, the furniture, the tables, the chairs. So it's how much can we stretch, but it is over the next 3 years for sure.
I think that's everyone, minus Councillor Hebert. So the one the one thing about speaking last is that I think it's already all been said. So I'll just add one big ditto to that, to everything that's been said tonight. Probably get in trouble for saying this, but I think this is my favorite presentation I've seen in my 9 years on council. I think the proposal is fantastic. The merits of it are, just, you can't argue against them. And, the youth for contributing. Thank you guys for coming today to the meeting and for being a part of this. I think that's what's important here. And I think, it was said around the table a few times, this is what the youth want. This is what they're asking for. And that's what makes this really important, because we're getting this directly. It's not an assumption based on that we're making. It's right from those who would use it and what they're looking for. And that's what really, I think, has an impact here. I think the location is great. As you know, my other job, I work across the street. Maybe I'm a little biased, but I think there's a lot that this site offers, and I think it hits a lot of the markers that you're looking for. I did have the pleasure of attending a presentation at the Optimus Clubhouse some time ago, so I kind of got a sneak peek of this presentation. And at that point, I believe I said it, but I'll say it again to be sure you have my full support on this. So thank you for coming this evening. Before I go to the vote, I asked for a motion to receive, but I believe I should have asked for the actual recommendation, which is that this request be referred to administration for report. Madam Clerk, can I ask the mover and seconder just to change? Okay, mover and seconder, are you okay if we amend that? Okay. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Looking forward to hearing from you in the future.
Okay, we're going to move on to our consent reports with the following recommendations. That Council proclaim the month of April 2023 as Parkinson's Awareness Month, and Monday, April 11th, 2023 as World Parkinson's Day in the City of Cornwall. That Council declare Thursday, March 30th, 2023 as Your TV Day in the City of Cornwall. That Council, I'm going to skip over that one. Number 4, that Council receive Report 2023-31 Financial Services for the 2022 Annual Report for the Municipal Grants Program. That Council proclaims Saturday, April 22nd, 2023 as Eco Day in the City of Cornwall. That Council support the proposed amendments to a new municipal oath of office to advance the call to action of truth and reconciliation. That RFP 23P01, which is engineering services for odor study and dewatering building odor control, be awarded to Jacobs Canada Consultancy Incorporated from Ottawa at the total bid price of $347,791.40. Tender 23T02, supply of 1 4-wheel drive articular tractor. Recommended that this tender be awarded to Karcher Municipal North America from Ombre, Ontario at the total bid price of $199,931.11. Tender 23T06, operation of household hazardous waste depot and recycling disposal of hazardous waste, with the recommendation that this tender be awarded to GFL Environmental Services from Ottawa at the total bid price of $378,666.50. Tender 23T09, traffic control signals and electrical works, with a recommendation that this tender be awarded to Black & McDonald from Ottawa at the total bid price of $399,076.45. Tender 23T11, grass cutting and trimming at various parks within the City of Cornwall, with a recommendation that the tender be awarded as follows. Items 1 to 5, to 2632431 Ontario Incorporated from Martintown, Schedule 6, Cut by Me Incorporated, and Schedule 7, 2632431 Ontario Incorporated. Tender 23 T13 Water Mains CIP lining on various city streets, with a recommendation that this tender be awarded to Foraction Incorporated from Saint-Hilaire, Quebec, at the total bid price of $1,110,544.29 for parts A to C and F as being the best bid. Tender 23 T14 Supply of Hot Asphalt, that this tender be awarded to Cornwall Gravel Company Limited from Cornwall, commencing on May 1st, 2023, with an option for an additional one-year extension at the total bid price of $297,472.50. Tender 23 T18 Supply of Minor General Construction Services as required, with a recommendation that this tender be awarded to Carl Bullock Construction Limited from Long Sault at the total bid price of $311,202 for the period of May 1st, 2023 to April 30th, 2025, with the option to renew for up to additional one-year extensions. RFP Terms of Reference for Design and Construction of Administration Services for the Affordable Housing Complex, with a recommendation to Council that Council receives this report. CPEG from March 19, 2023, HOTC 107 Sydney and 17 2nd Street West, with a recommendation that Council approve the two Cornwall Planning Programs Evaluation Group recommendations as presented on March 9th, 2023. So one motion for all of those reports, Mr. Mayor.
Motion, Councillor Bennett, seconder, Councillor Gardner, all in favor? Carried, thank you.
Under unfinished business listing, we are looking for a motion to receive the listing for March 27th.
Motion, Councillor Dupel, seconded Councillor Hollingsworth, all in favor? Carried, thank you.
Communication reports, the first being development charges interest policy update, with a recommendation that Council approve the updates to development charges interest policy.
Is there a motion? Councillor Bennett, are you moving the recommendation? Yes. Councillor Hollingsworth, seconding. Discussion. Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you.
Item 2, 2022 Drinking Water Quality Report, with a recommendation that Council receive this report.
Motion. Councillor Sabourin, Councillor Gardner, discussion. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just was floored by this report, and year after year we get the same perfect report. We have the cleanest, the best, some of the best water, and I just want to kudos to those folks who put that project together, who put all the information that I went through. At the end of the day, I didn't understand a lot of it, but you did a good job, as you do every year. I much appreciated. Just a comment, not a question. The question would have been, how the hell do you do it? You know, it's unreal, yeah.
Further questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Item 3. Employment Service Transformation Update, with a recommendation that Council receive this report.
Motion. Councillor Dupel, seconder, Councillor Bennett. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Municipal Grants Review Committee Terms of Reference, with a recommendation that Council approve the terms of reference for the Municipal Grants Review Committee.
Motion, Councillor Bennett. Are you moving the recommendation? Seconder? Councillor Dupel. Discussion. Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Good.
Just one question, Your Worship. Just bear with me for a second here. Did I see in the report, the original policy specifically said 3 councillors and 2 administrators having votes. And did I read it correctly in the red that suggested that the 2 administrators no longer vote? Did I get that properly?
Ms. Bailey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we've taken a look at terms of reference for our committees, and it's being recommended to council that staff are liaison and resource and non-voting members to our committees of council.
Okay, now that being said, can I ask why?
Perhaps I will ask the CAO.
Mr. Bola?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, generally we like to provide information to the councillors or to committees or groups who are making those voting decisions, and happy to do that. We, for example, have that experience with our CPEG committee and many of the other committees. So we like to act as resource people or information resources to the groups or committees, and it can put us into a difficult situation sometimes, of course, because if we were to vote on something and well, perhaps not myself, but if there is a staff person who votes in a certain direction and the general manager has a differing position, it puts us into a very difficult situation. So we would prefer that staff not vote, and that the councillors and sometimes, of course, lay people are voting members as well on some committees, but we prefer to not have staff voting.
Okay, so now that being said, and I read the report, so if I've missed it, please feel free to tune me in here, but there's no provision for additional members, correct? So in essence, there's only 3 people who vote?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, the conversations that occur at these meetings are very involved with staff. So, but the answer to your question is correct, as I understand it.
Okay.
Yes.
So go ahead, Ms. Bailey, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, exactly that. Like, we had our municipal grants review committee meeting, I think 2 of them in the last couple of weeks. Very, very involved, a lot of discussion, but at the end of the day, it's the 3 councillors that made the decision for, that represented council, basically.
So I will say, Your Worship, as administration probably knows, I did spend a lot of quality time working on this one. That being said, I can appreciate that administration shouldn't necessarily vote, but the thought that only 3 people ultimately make that decision, quite frankly, I'm not completely in favor of. I would support adding additional councillors or perhaps some additional lay people. So a committee of 5, quite frankly, is kind of the number in my mind that I have. And if it's not going to be administration, then either it should be more councillors or perhaps some rewrite to suggest that the lay appointments committee can appoint 2 lay people. I'm not sure if that's practical, but having only 3 to me really limits who ultimately makes the decision. And I can say that because I've spent 3 years myself on the committee and actually spent time on the original steering committee that suggested the policy. So unfortunately, I'm probably not going to support this as it's currently written, because only 3 members to me seems to be an awfully limited amount of people to make the decision. Not to suggest I have lack of confidence in the members. They've all been around, they know how it works. But I kind of think that 5 is more the number in my mind, because I think when it comes to voting on spending money, 3 people, like ultimately only 2 people make the decision. That's not a lot of people to spend taxpayers' dollars. And because of that, I'm going to vote against the policy as it's currently referred to. Now, I'm willing, Your Worship, to make a motion to defer, but I don't know if that's necessarily valid. I think I'd rather hear what my colleagues have to say on it, but I, as one member, I'm not going to vote in favor of it as it's currently written because of that individual edit. No disrespect to my colleagues. Thank you.
Motion to defer is always in order. Councillor Hollingsworth. Mr. Boileau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 3 is a small number, but all of our minor variances and severances are created through a committee of 3 members.
Mike, please.
I'll repeat that. So all of our committee of adjustment applications are decided by a group of 3 members.
Right.
And so I would suggest that a group of 3 is actually a reasonable number to make decisions like this. I'll also point out that all of these decisions are now coming to council, the municipal grants.
I don't mean to get into a debate with you, Mr. Boileau, but I'm not sure if the Committee of Adjustment is spending taxpayers' dollars, whereas this one is. And on a personal note, I'm not really completely fussy about some of the other committees where only 2 members vote either. But I'd like to make a motion to defer, Your Worship, to hear if the committee is prepared to entertain the addition, like I said, either some kind of lay appointment provision or to add even at least 1 more counselor. So I'd like to make a motion that we defer to hear some kind of feedback from the committee on whether 2 additional members would still be reasonable and allow them to function properly, if I can get a seconder for that.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Gunjo? Okay, we are now debating the motion to defer. Councillor Good, you're on my speakers list. Do you want to make comments at this time?
Sure. I notice in the revision here that it's been crossed out the line that the recording secretary shall forward the agenda and minutes to the city clerk for record retention. And maybe I missed it in here, but I'm wondering, through you, Mr. Mayor, what is the alternative then for actually maintaining the records from this committee?
Ms. Bailey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's because we're now on eScribe, so it's public for anybody to take a look at the agenda and the minutes of the committee. So we no longer have to physically give them to the clerk. They're available.
If I can follow up on that, is that the case for the majority of committees, or is that this committee specifically?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to forward that question to the clerk.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are going that way. So one of our priorities in our department this year is to transfer all of our committees onto eScribe so that everything is very similar. The looks of all the agendas and all of the minutes are very similar, and everything would be posted on our website and easily accessible to the public.
Thank you. And can I ask, is that mentioned in the terms somewhere here, and I missed that? I would suggest, if the motion is to defer, that be considered in terms of just including language that the minutes and agendas will be kept in eScribe so that it's clear.
Madam Clerk?
I believe those changes will be coming to council through the committee's bylaw recommendations. So as all of you know, after the Ombudsman's report, we are revamping our procedural bylaw and our committee's bylaw, and that information will be captured in there.
Okay. I will say that I probably will support the motion to defer. I agree that 3 voting members does seem like a small number, especially when determining funding applications. So as a total newbie, I'll just say I haven't sat in on these meetings, but I think a couple more voices around the table wouldn't hurt in terms of making those decisions. Thank you.
Councillor Hebert?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to basically say the same thing. I would support a motion to defer. I actually would have supported a motion to amend tonight, so we wouldn't have to wait to, there'd be a delay with all of that. So I'd like to see 5 voting members, but I think the motion to defer would give us a chance to discuss, is it 2 more councillors? Is it appropriate to have lay people on a committee that makes decisions around taxpayer dollars? I'm not sure really what the recommendation would be there, but yeah, I would certainly support a couple of more voting members.
Mr. Bolo?
On the question of lay people, we of course have the municipal accommodation tax committee, which is not a committee of this council. It's a separate committee, but it is 3 lay people, and I will tell you, it's 3 people, and it is all about funding. So that format is there, but if council wishes for there to be more than 3, that certainly we're happy to work with that.
Councillor Gardner, then Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the last two meetings, we were able to complete the outside agency's funding. It was very efficient with 3. The other 2, who were staff members, had input on the final decisions that we made, the 3 of us made. I just think it was efficient and it went through. I'm on the Eastern Ontario Health Unit Board. There's only 2 of us. Do we need 3 there? Do we need 4 somewhere else? Do we need 5? I mean, come on. It's efficient. It went well. And at the end of the day, council makes the final decision as to whether or not we're going to fund these groups. So I will not vote in favor of deferring it.
Ms. Bailey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to clarify something. So the council has provided direction to the committee to approve funding. What council approves is the envelope of funding, just so that we're clear that we're moving forward with the decisions made with this committee.
Councillor McDonald?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I don't support the motion to defer, nor do I support the motion to increase the size of the committee. I think that over the years, I've been on this committee years ago when the whole council at one point even was the whole committee. And it seems to me, considering the fact that the size, I know it's taxpayers' dollars, but the size of the purse we're actually dispensing, I think is commensurate with 3 people being able to administer it, especially because over the years, the terms of reference have been so refined that I think the committee of 3 has a tremendous amount of guidance available to them, and I believe it works. I know it's been a great relief to me how well it works, but maybe that's just because I'm not on it anymore, and I'm so happy not to be. And I commend those who do struggle with those grant applications every year, but I think 3 is good.
Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. So, if my colleague across the table here would remember, it was these decisions were made by consensus. So, we have the discussion like we always did. The staff that are there had the same input, or were able to answer the same questions. Just at the very end, they weren't part of the consensus vote, but we got to the consensus the exact same way with 3 as we did with 5. So this particular round didn't come down to 2 for, 1 against. It was, we do it by consensus. So I don't know if 4 or 5 is necessary. Councillors, because I think if we start going 4 or 5, 6 councillors, we may as well just bring it back to the budget process. I mean, I'm going to the extreme end here, obviously, but I can just tell you it worked very well, and nothing changed on how the decisions were made. It was all great discussion, and they were approved by consensus. So I don't see any extra bodies changing that process. And you'd be happy to know that I started using a lot of your phrases around that table. I felt like you were channeling me. But it was, suddenly I'm a tough guy anyway. So anyway, I just don't think I see a need for the deferral because I am in favor of the way it went, and I just wouldn't be in favor of adding any more bodies to it. It's just, it won't change anything, I guess, is where I'm going. Consensus is consensus, so I'm going to vote against the deferral.
Councillor Bennett, Councillor Dupel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I will certainly vote against the deferral. This is, I sat back on the outside agencies when we did it as council as a whole, so I haven't had the opportunity to sit on this committee until this term when I was appointed to it. And I have to tell you that the process that has been put in place, those who did that need to be applauded, because it was such a fantastic way of doing business. The applications, we were sent home with all of our binder ready for us with all of the applications, the scoring mechanism. We scored on our own at home, came back, went through all the discussions, talked about what my score was versus my colleague's score, see if we're in the same window of opportunity. It was just like a really good process, and administration had lots of good feedback to the process, and I want to thank Miss Bailey and her team for putting it together, because I couldn't have asked for a better experience around the table, around this committee. So I'll vote against the deferral.
Councillor McIntosh.
I'm voting for the deferral, not that, doesn't mean I'm voting to increase the non-member. Seems ironic that not long ago we were voting against decreasing PAC and keeping it large. So I'll support the deferral.
Before I go back to you, Councillor Hollingsworth, any further comments from anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Okay. Councillor Hollingsworth, I'll allow you to wrap up on the deferral.
I'll be brief, Your Worship. I'm not suggesting the process is flawed. In fact, I sat on the original steering committee that came up with the idea and sat on the Municipal Grants Committee for 3 years. I think the process works great. I'm glad that we finally have taken it away from council as a whole and turned it into a committee. I think it is far more efficient, and definitely administration has done a wonderful job. The time I was there, putting it all together and making it easy. I acknowledge consensus, and yes, I would agree it was like that before. I suspect it's still like that. But it seems to me, just as one member, if by some happenstance you get a 3-2, where 2 say, yes, we're good with this in terms of how they score it, and 1 says, no, I don't really agree, which is potentially bound to happen, you're in essence spending money with only 2 people deciding. Quite frankly, I think it's a little bit unfair, actually, to the committee to leave 3 people in charge, and that if somebody's unhappy, they end up being the ones that take the brunt of it. Whereas if you had a committee that's just a little bit bigger, you potentially have more ultimate responsibility, if you will. So the motion to have extra members is, to a certain degree, to be mindful to my colleagues who have to make that decision. If council wants to keep it at 3 and ultimately 2 people decide, so be it. But as one member, I'm not completely sure that that's how I wanted it to go. That wasn't the original premise when we had 5 voting members. Originally, we had 5 voting members. And that's all I'm really trying to get back to. And if it has to be 4, whatever, but originally, Your Worship, it was 5, which is where I think as one member it needs to be. But if there's not a will of council to look at that, so be it.
All in favor of the deferral? All opposed? Deferral fails. Back to the main motion. Any further comments? Okay. Councillor Bennett?
Just wanted to make a point before moving forward. So this, I want to make sure this passes. So if we were, to turn this down and go back to the drawing board, if we were to go to like 5 members and 2 disagreed, then you're approving with 3. So approving with 2 or 3 doesn't seem like a big stretch to me anyway. So I'm hoping we would pass this as is.
Any further comments? Okay. Seeing none, do we need the motion read again? Are we clear on the motion at this time? No? Okay, all in favor of the motion? All opposed? I'm gonna call that one again. All in favor, please? Yeah. Okay. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
The following motion is that council accept the updated Environmental and Climate Change Committee terms of reference.
Motion, Councillor McDonald, seconder. Councillor Hebert, any discussion? Councillor McDonald?
And given the discussion on the last motion, I just have to say that I'm really sorry that I can understand why staff is excluded from voting in some instances, but in this committee, especially, I lament the fact that the manager of environmental services and the sustainability project coordinator won't have the vote, because in this matter, knowledge, I think, is absolutely key. I know you can vote with opinion and conviction on almost any issue, but something that is so absolutely important to the well-being of our community and the future of the planet, why would we take the most knowledgeable people in the arena and say they can't vote? Because surely, you know, a pretty strong, credible basis for being able to vote is knowledge. And in this case, I just lament the fact that they're excluded. But I understand from hearing what Ms. Bailey said, that staff would rather not have that responsibility. But we hire staff because they've got the brains and the training and the education to be able to make these decisions. So I guess I just object.
Madam Clerk?
If I may offer, Mr. Mayor, I think it is in the Municipal Act that councillors' jobs are to set policy and administration's job is to implement policy. That being said, when items come to the committee, they have been vetted already. So for example, Ms. Bailey's terms of reference are very strict on how a group can even be introduced to the committee. They have to meet every single criteria. If it doesn't, they're refused automatically or asked for updates. And so I just wanted to put that information out there, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions on this motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Our next item is the Recreation, Placemaking, Arts, and Culture Advisory Committees. The recommendation is that Council approve the creation of a Recreation Advisory Working Group, the creation of a separate Arts and Culture Advisory Working Group, and then that the terms of reference for the Recreation Advisory Working Group be approved, and that the terms of reference for the Arts and Culture Advisory Working Group be approved.
Councilor Good? Microphone, please.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very thankful to see this coming back to council. Putting this forward, I knew it was ambitious, kind of putting so much into one committee, and I am pleased to see it broken into two. That said, what is being presented currently, I don't think meets the objective that was intended in the motion. And I can outline that with a few examples. But what I would like to do, that said, is I will make a motion to defer. If I may, continue. I think I need a seconder.
Councilor Bennett seconds. Motion
Thank you.
defers on table. Councilor Good?
So there are a few key elements that I feel are missing here. The first element that I find, and it's similar for both groups, is that they are being presented as working groups. And where I see this being a shortcoming is that working groups are not open to the public. And therefore, there's no public oversight over the topics that are being discussed at these meetings. And there's no opportunity for the public then to address what might be missed as we review this. So that's part one. I do feel that appointing lay members provides value, and it provides an additional insight that we internally may not have, and a level of expertise. I believe it would be valuable, similar to the Environment and Climate Change Committee, to also have partner organizations participate as non-voting resource members, particularly within the arts and culture, what I would suggest to be a committee of council, with the incoming arts center, with helping to define the role of the new arts coordinator, etc. I think that there will be some valuable input that can be discussed at this table, at that committee. In terms of what's included within the role, I think that's fair. but these are the reasons that I think it should be deferred. Again, likewise, for the Recreation Advisory Committee Working Group, I believe that this should be a committee as well. Again, for public oversight. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention, if I can, the Arts and Culture Working Group, as the terms of reference, they're referencing a 12-year-old document, and I believe that updating that document could and should be one of the mandates of this committee. I don't think working from a 12-year-old document should be the mandate, as I don't believe that it's reflective of our current landscape as it stands. On the other hand, as I speak about the Recreation Advisory Committee, we have an updated master plan when it comes to recreation. I think there are many recommendations within that we should be following. And in fact, one of the recommendations of that report was to reinstate the Recreation Advisory Committee with the inclusion of parks within that committee. So my intention in including placemaking is more broadly public spaces and how people interact with it, and how to create spaces that are not necessarily sports-based or playgrounds, but spaces where people can come together, gather, spend some time leisurely. So I think there is a little bit of work, a little teasing out that I would love to see done with this. So that is my motion to defer. Thank you.
Further comments? Councillor Bennett and Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Councillor Good and I had a good discussion about this earlier today, and we agreed on most points. I think the only difference we had is that I'm actually okay with the Recreation Working Group because the public already did have their say in the creation of that master plan. And seeing how the Waterfront Working Group works much better in that form than it did as a committee, a little bit more focused and with goals set out in the plan, it's easy to keep focus as a working group. Where we do agree is the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee should be a committee with lay appointments on it, in my opinion. Just looking at, the mandate and all those things within what's presented to us, it says the culturescape of Cornwall, communities of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry. Those three made it very clear to us in the last, when this committee was around leading up to 2018, that thanks for the invite, not interested. Mostly because almost every decision we were making was a benefit to the city of Cornwall and had very little effect on Morrisburg or Long Sault or Lancaster. And so they all had councillors from their respective communities on that committee originally, and then one by one stepped aside saying, this is great and we wish you luck, but it's not for us. So that they're mentioned here, I think, could be taken out. Also, it says that 3 members of staff shall be considered to be voting members. That's kind of against what we've just been talking about in that we're redoing those policies. So I think that should also be taken out. But mainly, I think it should be a committee with lay members. Is that Culturescape plan, I think, 95% of those goals have been met. I think the one that's outstanding is the Arts Center, and that's coming down the pipe now. So I don't see a lot in that plan left to do. So what do? I think at that point we need to involve, like we had before, we had members from the Arts Council on it, we had members from 2 or 3 local art organizations, and kind of trying to figure out, what we're going to do for this area. But now, and the big concern back then was it's a fractured group. Well, they're not fractured anymore. They now understand that the better that this person does, the better they're going to do, and then the better that other person's going to do, and that they work better as a group. So I think if they were all on the committee now, we could look at what needs to happen going forward. We already did what we did 13 years ago. That's been done. So I think we need to look forward to what we need to do now. And it was mentioned by my colleague, the Art Center is coming up. How's that getting programmed? Who's going to be involved with these things? We don't know. Nobody knows yet. We have ideas, but it hasn't been hashed out. So I think as a committee, that would be much better served than a working group at this point, because the working group doesn't have anything to work with. The Culturescape plan is done. So I would like to see that one changed. But as I did say, I'm okay with the Recreation Working Group, but I do like this deferral, so that, in my case, the Arts and Culture Advisory Working Group is changed to committee. Thank you.
Mr. CAO, Mr. Bullough.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually had some conversation today with Councillor Good, and then followed up with Mr. Fothrop to talk a bit about some of this. A working group has historically, and there's not a lot of history there, but we've been doing working groups for about 5 years. The municipal grants was probably one of the first that we did. And they generally have a term and a task. So, you know, achieve what the parking lot or the parking working group was the same. We had a task, and it was to look at parking, and you have a term and it finishes. It's not for the term of council. I do think that these are probably better defined as committees, because they are going to be ongoing, I think, both for the arts and culture and the recreation. I think the point that's made about how the public had their say, I think that's also a very valid point, and it applies to both of them. And so there, you know, it is, I suppose, a question of whether you want lay members or not. They had their say, and do you want them to continue? Perhaps you do, perhaps you don't. But I think if council does wish to defer, we would probably have another look at some of the details that we're talking about. So for example, whether it should be a working group or a committee, I think probably looking at it, it probably should be a committee, or they should be committees. But if council wishes to defer, I think we could go back and have a look at some of the detail.
Councillor McDonald.
Mr. Mayor, so I guess my feelings on this are I'm not in favor. And I just want to say, I think that when we form a committee, it's because we're addressing a specific need. And when we formed the Cultural Advisory Committee, and I'm sure when the Recreation Advisory Committee was established, there were very perceived needs and pressures from the community. And I just want to tell everybody that those two committees, they weren't killed. They died natural deaths because we achieved a certain resolution and a focus, and I don't think we've completed working out the culture scape yet. Certainly the Arts Centre is a big part of it, but in terms of the artistic landscape and cultural landscape in the city as it is now compared to what it was in 2011, I got to tell you, there was a gaping hole when it came to arts and culture. And I would say that anybody looking at our community would say that it's a place of tremendous ferment in the arts and in culture. We have so many really successful arts and culture groups operating in the city. And frankly, when these are community groups, I think that's 10 times more valuable than a council group. But if it weren't being successful at the community level, then obviously council has to step in and help steer, or at least respond to needs that maybe aren't being met. But I think the health of the developments in the arts and in culture in this city, I think it's really going well. And I don't see any great pressure for us to do something. And I have to say I've got great confidence in city administration responding pretty quickly to any group that comes before them and says, look, we need this or we need that. Like, just even take the painting of the wall, you know, the diversity wall in the park. I mean, that wasn't a committee, and it was just a good idea that came to, I don't know if it came through council or just went to administration, but good ideas get responded to. And I kind of think that with everything we have going on right now, this is kind of like spinning our wheels, almost like forming a committee for the sake of having a committee. I don't perceive the great need. Like, I just think things are actually in motion and in development right now, and changing steering or direction. I think we lose the focus that I think our city is being enriched by at the moment. It's not just that I don't want to sit on another committee, but really, without a specific purpose, I don't want to sit on another committee. Thank you.
Mr. Wallow?
Yeah, I'll thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to be brief. the council would know that we had a recreation advisory committee, and that we did away with having a committee primarily because we didn't have an up-to-date recreation master plan. We now have that. It's very new. And I think the main purpose of this committee or working group is to implement that recreation master plan. So I don't think we're as strong in the arts and culture. Some of that stuff is dated. But I'd like to ask Mr. Fothrop to provide any additional comments he may have with hearing some of the commentary and questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Boileau. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Boileau's comments are correct. Our recreation master plan is quite up to date. It is a 10-year planning, strategic planning document that our recreation department will follow for the next 10 years. So it identifies the recreation needs of the community. The Culturescape study that was done about 12 years ago served that purpose as well, albeit 12 years ago. And it without a doubt, Councillor Good's comments are correct. It is without a doubt due for an update as well to identify the arts and culture needs of our community for the next 10 years going forward. A major recommendation in that study was the Arts and Culture Centre, the development of one, which has been a project that's been underway for 6-7 years now. But we're finally reached the point where it's been awarded. And so I think quite soon when the shovel hits the ground, we'll be able to check that box off. And my suggestion would be that this arts and culture, whether it be a working group or a committee, whenever they meet, one of their first tasks, I think, would be to develop a terms of reference to hire a consultant to do an update to that Culturescape study to, again, guide us for another 10 years.
Councillor McIntosh.
I'm just trying to read between the lines here. Administration would favor these two committees? For the reasons you just outlined.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we would favor the establishment of whether it be a working group or a committee. Mm-hmm. The suggestion of a working group is really more just to mirror some of the success that was seen with the waterfront committee. In that they have the specific task is the implementation of that strategic planning document. Where we have run into issues in the past is where there are lay people, albeit very well meaning, tend to speak from their own personal experience or own certain interests. They're not necessarily aware or privy to the other needs of the other areas of recreation or arts and culture, whereas administration and council hear from the public as to what they want and what they need. And these strategic planning documents really identify it. So the intent is that we don't have people just going off script and sort of cherry picking things that aren't necessarily anywhere in any of these strategic planning documents.
Tongue in cheek. Maybe it could turn up the heat too.
Further comments or questions on the deferral? Okay, seeing none. All in favor of the deferral? All opposed? Deferral passes. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was dealing with a little bit of a technical difficulty at the beginning of the meeting, so I'm not sure which items were moved to communication after this. So if we can wait for the clerk, or I can continue if somebody can give me, yes?
Okay, Mr. CAO.
The items removed from consent into communication?
Yeah, we'll go in order. The first
Yeah,
one.
so number 3.
I raised this one, just a point of clarification. perhaps a little self-serving, but it came up the last time. Somebody suggested what I did with the extra money I was getting, and I explained I don't get that extra money. I'm talking about the raise in region remuneration that was Carrie Lynn. Oh, she's left us. Anyway, Carrie Lynn and I sit on that committee, and it's we're the only committee members who do not receive the money. Okay, I'm not making a pitch for the money. I'm just pointing something out here. It comes to about $1,000 a year that we return to the city, that money we earn from the Raise in Region. And we both have sat on this committee for 8 years, so just a point of clarification, we have returned $8,000 to the corporation. And I thought we could have a pretty good party with that one. Anyway, I just want to point that out. Tongue in cheek, do we get a tax receipt for this?
Ms. Bailey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe you would get a tax receipt for that.
Nice try. Somebody mentioned to me last year, I said, no, the money goes to the city, not to carry that around.
Thank you for your contribution, Councillor McIntosh. Any further discussion, questions on this item? Councillor Gardner?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I sit on the airport committee, and if I'm going to drive to Lancaster to meetings, then I'd like my gas paid too. That's not a contribution to the city, it's something that I'm doing for the city. So anybody who sits on that committee and has to go to Lancaster, the gas the way it is now, I'd really appreciate it if I could get that too.
Councillor Gardner, you can submit your kilometers for reimbursement when you travel outside the city for city business. When I was on the Airport Commission, we met in Somerstown. I did that. So,
Point of clarification.
Councillor
That
McIntosh?
money I was talking about has nothing to do with gas mileage. It's strictly remuneration from there. And when we do meet in Lancaster, I do put in mileage to the city. But the other one is just straight out salary.
Like you, it was tongue in cheek.
Are there any non-tongue-in-cheek comments on this item? Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just through you, just for a point of clarification for myself, does this show up as remuneration for these councillors? Because if it does, why does it? It's not. They're not getting any money.
Ms. Bailey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can perhaps change our statement for next year that notes that those monies that are paid to both councillors are reimbursed to the city.
I would appreciate that. It doesn't affect me, but I think that if a member of the public was looking at this thinking, he's making more money than the rest, it's just for clarity. Just if it was a separate line, I think it would be a little cleaner. Thanks.
Further questions or comments? Okay. Need a motion to receive the report as presented, please. Councillor Bennett, Councillor McDonald, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Mr. Ballo?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
The next item is item 8 regarding management biosolids.
Is there a motion before we start discussion? Can I get a motion on the RFP, please? Councillor Gardner, seconded Councillor Bennett. Discussion, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Your worship, I asked to pull it. I'm just curious, if you take a look on page 97, make sure I get this right. Yeah, so on page 97, the original or the awarding bid is 236,000 approximate. The next bid is like double. How is that? Like, are we getting a lesser service? Like, typically, when you get tenders, everybody is kind of close, within 10 grand or something like that. But this one is like double the amount of money. Do we know why? Like, are we getting a lesser service for the 236 or how does that happen?
Ms. Bailey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I wouldn't say that we're getting a lesser service. We're getting the service that we requested. So the evaluations took place by a committee, a steering committee, and it was evaluated based on the points on page 96. Cost is one of those factors, and it's weighed into the evaluation. So I didn't sit on this evaluating committee, but definitely GHD would not have received the award if they were not compliant with the RFP requirements.
Everybody gets the same document. Anyway, it just struck me as curious that we're talking about such a huge discrepancy, but anyway, fair enough, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Bailey.
Any further questions or comments on the RFP? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Tender 23, T10, grass cutting and trimming at various City of Cornwall locations, with the recommendations that items 1, 2, and 4 be awarded to EC Works Limited from Long Sault, that Schedule 3 be awarded to Superior Group, Williamsburg, and items 5 to 8 to Service Master by Fox in Cornwall. These recommendations represent the low bidders meeting tender specifications, pending equipment review and documentation submission.
Motion? Counselor McDonald, seconder. Counselor Good, discussion. Counselor McDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I pulled this because a couple of years ago, we changed our policy on grass cutting the same time that we brought in, no mow may and naturalization of public spaces. So I'm wondering if we're maintaining that policy of having as much as we can not being cut, a certain amount beside the pathways, but other than that, letting things go natural.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our current policy right now is consistent with the recommendations from 2018 of keeping certain areas in parks naturalized.
Good. I have to say that I live near a bike path, and so I think since I moved there, more of the space around the path is let lie naturally. But anytime I've noticed any poison parsnip or anything like that, the city crews come out and they immediately take care of any possible threat. So I think it's a policy that's working well. Thank you.
Counselor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I'd sent them emails shortly after budget because I kind of kicked myself in the rear end because I had forgotten to discuss this during budget, in that some of our neighborhood parks were leaving naturalized areas and it's creating some problems. I can speak specifically to the park that's nearest me because I see it, which is Menard Park, and there's a section of it, about I don't know if it's a third, but maybe at least a quarter of it, on the west side doesn't get the grass cut more than I think twice a year, and those neighbors that live on that side are having a rat problem. And so if you look at our website, it tells you if you want to make sure you don't have a rat problem, you should keep your grass nice and trimmed and cut. Well, they do. The problem is on the other side of the fence. So it's a little bit, this may be a strong word, but it's kind of hypocritical to say, keep your grass nice and neat and you won't have any rats, but don't look at my side of the fence because it's 6 or 8, 10 inches high. So I had a conversation back in the fall with former CAO Maureen Adams, and that the savings that when this was originally done for some savings for the budget to let naturalized areas grow, those savings are they're not what they were intended to. They're much lower in that we've kind of deviated away from what the original cutting, the budget cut has kind of been added back gradually just because we've had problem areas from the conversation I had. So I'm just wondering, now we're rewarding these tenders, and I just want to know, is it too late to go back to the ones cutting some of the city parks where we've had some issues to say, we would like you to cut the other 25%, what would your adjusted rate be? Is that something we can still do? Because it's creating problems, and I don't think a neighborhood park is the best place for big naturalized areas. So I'm just wondering, is that something we can do moving forward, or is that going to take a motion of council to have happen?
Ms. Bailey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what administration does do is we put out our procurement documents based on budget approval. and if council would like to do something different than what was approved through the budget, a motion to council is in order for that, and a report back from administration.
Okay, fair enough. Just let everyone know that that motion will be, I think, coming from me on the next meeting.
Councillor Gardner.
The other problem that is coming up with No Mo May is the Eastern Ontario Health Unit has identified that ticks are moving towards here. We have deer along Power Dam Drive, and deer are the ones that carry the ticks. And the ticks need long grass to hook onto. If they're short grass, they're not there. So I'd like to have a discussion about that with Dr. Paul too, and make sure that that doesn't happen.
Councillor Good.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. As you were bringing that up, I believe it was the last council meeting, if I'm not mistaken, or the one before that, there was an update from the Environment Department in regards to No Mo May, and I believe it was mentioned that they did testing on tick populations, and that they did not find from their sample studies that there were any difference in tick populations in the long grass versus short grass. I might be mistaking the exact, but maybe perhaps if you could provide some clarification on that. Thank you.
Yeah, to you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Our No Mo May council report that previously went to council does explain a lot of these myths and facts, and we also have on our website right now more additional educational material. We've done, our sustainability coordinator's done a lot of research on this because there are a lot of rumors, and we've been able to, I guess, dispel a lot of the things that are said. Ticks specifically, they come from wooded areas, so if you make sure to check yourself, your pet's coming from the wooded areas, they shouldn't be transferred to your lawns and neighborhoods, but we have lots of material online.
If I can make a suggestion on that, I would recommend probably that you talk to Dr. Paul. Apparently they're moving this way, and I don't want to, it was just on the news that a woman close to Ottawa just died and another one was paralyzed. So at the end of the day, it's a serious issue that has to be looked into. Thank you.
Councillor Good. Okay. Any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? Carried, thank you.
Our next item is the RFP Terms of Reference 23P06 Consulting Services for the Wastewater Treatment Plan Digesters. The action recommended is that council receive this report.
Motion. Councillor McDonald, seconder, Councillor Good. Discussion. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a couple of questions, and the first thing I want to say is I am just amazed that we have such a huge piece of equipment, two of them, that were built in 1969, and they're still going strong. And in fact, we're not even looking at replacing them. All we're looking at doing is relining them. This, to my mind, is just, it's astounding. So a couple of questions. One thing was mentioned that the size of each digester is 2,272 cubic meters. How big is that? Like, are we talking something the size of this room or the size of this building or a city block? And when do we get a tour? But anyway, just help me visualize just how big these things are.
Mr. Michael Fothrop.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we can absolutely provide a tour of the wastewater treatment facility and show you the digesters. I would say they're probably close to the size of this room, maybe, potentially, pretty much. I was maybe a little smaller. That would probably be the size of one, yeah.
Okay, well, that helps. And I saw that in the description of how the work's going to be done, that one digester, they'll each to be done one at a time, but the digester will be lowered? Like,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, there's a volume of sludge in the digester which needs to be lowered, removed, and then such that the lining can occur.
I misread it. I
Yeah.
thought it was actually the digester that was going to be lowered, and I thought, good grief. Okay,
No.
thanks. That makes a lot of sense. So then, my other question is, this is going to take a long time to do this work. So is the other digester going to be able to handle the capacity?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the other digester would be able to handle the capacity in the interim. We'd only be able to do one at a time.
Okay, so just what lining do we use that is so effective? Like every 10 years, we're going to replace it, and it sounds as though the original digester surface is going to be evaluated, but it's lasted since 1969, and
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so the consultant will review and specify the type of lining that will go in. The former lining was a coal tar epoxy, which, yeah, absolutely, it did last a long period of time. However, it's past its lifespan now, and just because of the nature of what occurs in the digester, there's potential that the concrete structure is also starting to fail and will need rehabilitation as well. So that will all be reviewed by the consultant and scope of work finalized and proposed.
okay. So when we spent 51 million, however many years ago, on bringing in secondary waste treatment, so the digesters obviously weren't involved. They preceded that huge expenditure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, they were part of the primary treatment facility.
Wow.
They also did they have received upgrades along
Right.
since 1969, but this is the first time the lining's replaced.
Wow. Well, I'm pretty impressed. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, carried, thank you.
Our next item is the week of mourning for city employees, with a recommendation that the city flags be lowered for this week of March 27 to honor former city employees and members of council who have passed away in 2022.
Motion, Councillor Garner, Councillor Bennett. Discussion, Councillor Dupel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to take a moment to say what a great way to pay tribute to our former employees and council members that have passed away. And I know that the report comes from HR, but I know that the clerk's department, Madam Clerk and Madam Deputy Clerk, had pull a lot together to make this happen. So I just wanted to personally thank them. And as my colleagues know, my day job, I work with people who have intellectual disabilities. And I just wanted to say that when I was reading my agenda this weekend, I took quite a few moments to reflect, because the city of Cornwall is such an inclusive employer that Michelle Balan, who volunteered for 22 years at the Optimist Club and was treated like royalty and as a star employee there, has made the list today, and the city has she's supported here at the Cornwall office, or was, and the city has put her in the week of honoring those who have gone before us. But I just wanted to say that I was so moved by Madam Deputy Clerk had called me to see who I could connect her with to get some info, but when I actually seen it in the report, I was truly moved. So I just want to say, on behalf of all people that we support with disabilities, that is one way to show that the city of Cornwall is an inclusive employer. So thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you.
So moving on to bylaws. So we are looking for one motion to approve bylaws 2023-22 to 25, and then 27 to 31. Mr. Mayor.
Motion, Councillor Bennett, Councillor Good. Discussion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Councillor Hebert.
And now for the separate motion for bylaw 2023-26 to declare the property as surplus to the needs of municipality, specifically 305 York Street.
Motion. Councillor McDonald, Councillor Bennett. Any discussion? Councillor Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I asked to remove this from the rest of the bylaws because I wanted to speak against voting to put this on market. This is a city facility that could be used for so many community needs we have right now. We did have community agencies express the desire to either rent the space or have an agreement, and I don't have one that's coming to mind because there are so many different needs that it could address. And so I would rather be in favor of we retaining, us as a city retaining the property and working out an agreement with a community agency who's looking to fulfill a need, be it with transitional housing, homelessness. The maternity care center had come up for a while. That's still something that would be a great location for. But I just, I know how this will be voted on. I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that I was not in support of it being put as surplus land.
Further questions or comments? Councillor Dupel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would echo my colleagues' comments, and I'll vote against this as well.
Further comments? Okay, seeing Councillor McDonald, then Councillor Good.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems to me we had a discussion at one point, I don't think it was in camera, on the fate of this building. And I was given the understanding then that there isn't necessarily a hard fixed price on this property, that if something really valued came up in an offer, that we'd be free to accept it. And this is going to come back to council. So I think that maybe contributes to maybe a bit of relief for my colleagues' dismay.
Mr. Boileau?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. As Councillor Hebert pointed out, we have received a number of very good proposals for this building. What we're pointing out is that our preference, we own a lot of buildings, and we need to pay for the operating costs for all of these buildings. And while we think that there are some very good uses that have been proposed for this building, we don't think that the best scenario is that the city continue to be the owner. What's beneficial in this case is that we are the owner, or the city is the owner, and can select the best bid, which is not necessarily the highest bid. So if an organization comes forward and council feels that that is the best organization, perhaps together with the cost that is being provided, it is entirely council's decision to make. It's a consideration of proposed use, cost, fit for the neighborhood. Zoning is something that needs to be considered as well. We can't simply put just anything in there. It has to meet zoning. So it was felt that because of cost, and there is a significant operating cost to this building. The other point I want to make is that when we own a building and we have someone in the building, and we know this because of other properties, if we have someone come into the building, we need someone in that building. When you sell the building and you sell it to an organization which purchases the property, it's then their responsibility. Insurance and all of that, manning the facility is all theirs. So those were all considerations that we looked at in making this recommendation. Again, we would love to see it have a very good community use, but at the end of the day, we think it's better if it's not city-owned, if it's owned by the organization that's operating.
Councillor Good, then Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't previously aware that we had been receiving offers and or had been approached by community organizations looking to lease the space. And I feel like that does change the conversation. Knowing the nonprofit sector often running on grants year to year, there's not budgets for purchasing a building more often than not. And I understand that these things are mortgaged over a long time, but nonetheless, I wonder, knowing now that we have been approached, if we can look at some of the organizations that have approached us and maybe consider something along the lines of a lease to own agreement, or some way, saying that we would, potentially favor having a community organization that's going to be bringing value back into our community, and we would give them maybe a preferred rate. But when they're placing bids, they don't know what other people are placing the bids at. So I would be definitely interested in looking at what our options are and looking at what organizations have approached us, the budgets that we would consider if we were considering leasing the space out, and I would ask Mr. CAO if they were leasing the entire space. I assume we would not then have to have a staff occupying the building. It would just be a regular leasing agreement, would it not?
I do believe that would be the case. I guess what I'm saying is that we gave consideration to a lease situation. I think it'd be very difficult for us to recover our costs. Especially in, as you've described, nonprofit organizations having difficulty. So I'm not sure if Ms. Bailey has any additional comments to make in terms of the process of selling the property or otherwise.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not aware of any proposals that have come to administration that have not already been shared with council enclosed. So we've had interested parties, but we haven't had proposals. And so it's very difficult to organize something like that if the city continues to own the building. It recommended from administration would be that there is flexibility for council to consider all proposals, whether there's a monetary value that comes with that proposal. Mm-hmm. And then the city it's surplus needs.
I would be interested in having a better understanding of the financial implications in a scenario where we would be leasing it out, at least knowing what would be required in order for us to break even on that, so that it's not costing us money every year. But just to know what would that level be that we would need in order to break even on that property on a year-to-year basis.
I'm venturing a guess at about $100,000 a year, but I would ask Mr. Jamie Fothrop to provide comments.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I understand it to be about $85,000 a year is what our operating costs are.
Thank you.
Councillor McIntosh.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the leasing option too, but Mark well explained. The previous council did see the 5, whatever it was, 3, 4, 5 people who were interested. Perhaps the new members could be briefed by the mayor in his office or something, but most of us seen what went on, and who was interested and who wasn't interested. And, I think the best solution is to put up for sale. And as you said, we don't have to take the highest, best bid. We can take the best suited one. I mean, somebody could be the 4th highest, as long as they, which is my next question, appraised value. Have we ever had an appraised value on this property? Or a guesstimate, estimate?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we do have an appraised value for the property.
You wouldn't want to share that with us?
I don't have it handy. Do you have, I think it was 500. I believe it was $500,000.
That's what I thought, yeah. Okay. Okay, sounds good.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Your Worship. Perhaps a question to Ms. Bailey and then maybe a comment. Ms. Bailey, if we approve this bylaw this evening, council still has some wiggle room legally. In other words, it's not like the highest offer is the one we officially have to take, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's how the bylaw reads exactly. Like any proposal that comes to the city will be presented to council and closed, and it'll be council's decision.
Okay. So if you look at the $500,000, and I mean, I don't know if anybody's going to offer that much or whatever. The point is, if you look at that plus the additional $85,000 and you run that over a 4-year span, that's somewhere around $500,000 as well. That's like $1 million. Now, Your Worship, I get the premises. We, help these agencies, but it's been kicking around for a while. Nobody's made a formal proposal. And quite frankly, the city of Cornwall is really not in the real estate business. We don't develop, we don't do real estate. We own real estate for our industrial park because it's in our best interest to do that. It helps our economy and that kind of stuff. And perhaps we may purchase a building, i.e. the Arts Center, because we see a specific need for that building or whatever said property. We have a deliberate need for those types of things. But in this case, we don't have a specific need that we've identified as a corporation. We have no formal offers that have come forward from anybody. And the bylaw specifically says that if somebody makes an offer and we as a council said, gee, that's a really great idea, and yeah, it's not the best offer or the highest offer, but it really suits what we think we want to put there, we can still pursue it. The longer we sit on this property and don't do anything with, we're dinging John Q. Public taxpayer to the tune of somewhere shy of $100,000. Plus the value you recoup from the $500,000 in potential interest or investment we can make from it. And while I certainly can appreciate that we should help these agencies, I get it, but nothing formal is out there, and there's nothing stopping these agencies, if they really saw this property as having value, to make some kind of a proposal, in which case we can say, okay, you know what, we're not going to sell it, we're going to deal with X agency because that meets what we need through some strategic plan or whatever the case may be. So I'm prepared to support the bylaw. I don't feel like sitting on property that is technically surplus. We've decided, we've had a chance, we've had great discussions about it already at great length. I suspect administration have discussed it even before it came to council. It's surplus. We don't have a use for it. And our policy specifically says, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Bailey, when we have surplus land and we don't have a need for it, we sell it. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. That's what I'm suggesting we do here. So I'm going to support the bylaw as it's currently written. Thank you.
Further comments? Sure. It's a bylaw, it's a bit unusual, but Councilor Huber, I'll let you have closing words.
Okay, thank you. There's been a comment that no one's made a formal proposal. Just in my memory, and I might be a little bit wrong here, but last term of council, when this became available, there were organizations who expressed interest. We discussed it. We said, you know what, let's figure it out. Maybe let's put together a process where actual applications could be submitted to the city. And then we heard nothing for months. It came back to us a while back, a couple council meetings ago. This was what was voted on to propose this motion. You may remember I spoke against it. So there was no opportunity for formal proposals because we said, let's think about it. And then we didn't offer that opportunity. So organizations didn't have the opportunity. Those organizations are not going to be able to afford even a reduced rate. If you want to sell this for $1, maybe. You might have an organization that will be interested in purchasing this for $1, but not for, we're looking at 500,000, not even for half. These organizations will need to take all of their funding to put into operations. So the city wouldn't have to spend the $85,000 in operations. An organization would do that. They would also supply the insurance as you would when you rent property, et cetera, et cetera. Municipalities exist to own services, or exist to operate and deliver services. I see this as an excellent opportunity to support organizations who are doing so but are limited in their capacity with facilities. So I'm a little, as I said previously, I'm disappointed in this proposal and this bylaw. So I will vote against it. And I hope maybe there's a proposal for $1 that'll come, and I will support that proposal when it does come in camera.
Mr. Bolo?
I just, in trying to decide how to make a recommendation to council, as I said, we tried to understand the operating costs. We now know approximately what that number is. If we don't get a return of $85,000 a year, we're subsidizing one organization in this community, which is somewhat unfair to the other organizations that are not enjoying that subsidy. Well, between snow removal, heat, building maintenance, it's very easy to get to $85,000.
Through the chair, please.
Sure.
Mike, please.
Microphone, please.
You're renting the facility, aren't you responsible for those utilities, et cetera? The operator, say a nonprofit organization rents it, they would be responsible for snow clearing, et cetera. We would be, it's okay. Anyways, enough. I know where this is going. I just wanted to voice my opinion. I did that. We're done.
All in favor of the motion? All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Are there any reports from standing advisory, special, and ad hoc committees of council? Hearing none, we are looking for a motion to adopt the confirming bylaw.
Motion, Councillor McDonald, seconded, Councillor Gardner. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Motion to adjourn. Councillor McDonald, seconded, Councillor McIntosh. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We are adjourned. Good night. Oswald.